Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're not just hearing a story, you're walking through one. Imagine sitting at a dinner table, but there's no steam, no clatter of chopsticks, no conversation. Just an empty bowl, your stomach folding in on itself, and the flicker of a single candle casting long shadows across bare walls. Your neighbors smile faintly through cracked lips, because no one dares say the word out loud. Famine. There is no way you would survive this era. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far or fascinating, drop your location in the comments. I love seeing where these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe open the window for that soft background wind hum, because this will hit a little more than you expected. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit on a low wooden stool in a dusty village in Henan province. It's late 1959. The sun is down, the air is still, and your stomach feels like it's eating itself. There's a dinner table in front of you, if you can call it that. Really, it's just a few chipped bowls and a ladle that hasn't scooped anything real in weeks. A faint bitterness fills your nose, the scent of boiled weeds and rainwater. That's what passes for soup now. Outside, someone is playing a flute, not for music, but to keep from crying. Your neighbor, Mr. Gao, used to teach school. Now he spends his days looking for bark that isn't poisonous. You tried chewing leather once, but it gave you sores. Everyone's cheeks have sharpened, bodies slouched into half-skinny silhouettes. No one talks about hunger. Talking implies there's something to solve. You're told things will get better, that the nation is rising, but all you feel is the weight of your bones. There's a big red poster peeling on the wall, Mao's face smiling like he knows something you don't. He probably does. You've heard the quotas are being met, that China is producing more grain than ever. That's why your village had to give up its stockpile to the state granary last week. The party cadres clapped as they watched the carts roll out. You smiled too. Everyone did. Because if you don't smile, someone reports you. You saw what happened to the Wang family. One wrong comment about the harvest, and now their house is boarded up and their field's been reassigned. Mrs. Wang's scarf was still hanging on the door when they disappeared. Historians still argue whether the early reports of crop abundance were naive optimism or intentional fraud. Either way, the result is the same. In a twisted paradox, the more people starve, the more the state boasts about feeding them. You walk to the communal kitchen, though kitchen is generous. It's a soot-stained hut where volunteers stir pots of whatever anyone found that day. Tree leaves, wild grasses, the occasional rat if someone's lucky. You once found a patch of mushrooms and boiled them with crushed corn husk. Everyone said it tasted like old socks, but no one left a drop. Tonight's stew is different, darker, thicker, and it smells off. Not rotten, just unfamiliar. Someone jokes, might be real meat. No one laughs. You ladle some into your bowl. Sip. It's warm, heavy, and oddly familiar. You don't ask questions. That's the first rule now. You remember your uncle saying, China has 600 million mouths, but only one voice. Back then it sounded poetic. Now it's terrifying. That voice tells you this is a temporary hardship, a test of loyalty, that eating less is patriotic, that dying is honorable. You know they're lying, but you nod anyway. Ooh, a mainstream fact. By 1959, China's reported grain production numbers were so exaggerated that the state requisitioned more than actual yields, leaving many villages with nothing. In some regions, officials believed their own lies. In others, they knew better and enforced quotas anyway, fearing retribution. But here's a fringe tidbit. Some villagers began placing family heirlooms, jade bangles, old coins, into the fields, believing it might please the land into producing food again. Folk magic, born from bureaucratic madness. Night deepens. You return home, your stomach heavier but not full. You lie down on the mat beside your younger cousin, whose ribs rise and fall like a dying accordion. He sleeps with his eyes slightly open now. Less like a child, more like something between waking and not. You stare at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the beams. Your thoughts drift to rumors, a neighboring province where people ate their dead. You don't believe it, not yet. You tell yourself it's exaggeration, propaganda, ghost stories to keep children obedient. But then you remember the stew. You remember that no one brought food today. And you remember that Mrs. Liu's father passed away 2 days ago. You shut your eyes. You don't want to know. You really, really don't. You wake up the next morning to a cold floor and the sound of distant shouting. It's not angry, more like organized enthusiasm. Outside, the commune leaders are rallying people again. Another day, another quota. This time, it's steel. Yes, steel. You are told that even though you've barely got food, you must help China leap forward. Not step, leap. And leaping means backyard furnaces. You, your family, your neighbors, you're all part of this national mission now, smelting metal in makeshift kilns that look more like tombstones than furnaces. You melt down your only kitchen knife. Your cousin contributes a bicycle pedal. Someone brings a door hinge. A woman sobs as she hands over her iron wok. It's not just the loss of tools, it's the symbolism. These are the bones of daily life being sacrificed for a ghost of industry. Sparks fly. The fires burn for days. But the metal that comes out is useless, brittle, impure, a joke to any real metallurgist. Historians still argue whether Mao genuinely believed in the backyard furnace scheme or simply used it as a show of ideological unity. Either way, by 1960, fields across China had been torn up to build kilns, and while the fire raged, the crops quietly died. You're told to plant rice closer together so the stalks support one another. It sounds clever. It's not. The plants compete for nutrients and suffocate each other. You're told to dig deeper, aerate the soil like you're tickling it awake. But all that does is expose roots to frost and rot. You learn that ideology doesn't feed people, but ideology doesn't care. You walk to your plot with a wooden hoe and blistered hands. The soil crumbles like ash. Nothing grows here anymore. Still, you're expected to report high yields. One man suggests writing abundant on a sign and sticking it in the dirt. Everyone chuckles, but quietly, eyes scanning for informants. There's a party slogan painted in red on the wall. Smash nature, command the earth. You wonder if Earth ever asked for that. A quirky truth. Some communes held crop competitions where villagers would stage fake harvests. They'd borrow bundles of wheat from neighboring fields and stack them near the official measuring site, like props in a political theatre. The best actor won a certificate, maybe even a handful of rice. You know someone who once faked an entire rice field with stalks tied to bamboo poles. When the inspectors came, they nodded approvingly, said this was the model village. Then they left, and so did the rice, straight back to the storage hut. Meanwhile, people eat grass. Not metaphorically, literally. You try boiling it with hot stones, hoping the minerals might add something useful, but all it adds is stomach pain. Your aunt says it reminds her of cow feed. You say that like it's a bad thing. At least cows used to be fat. Remember that bitter stew? The one you drank without asking. It's happening more often now. Every few days, something new shows up in the communal pot. And each time, fewer people ask questions. The quiet is not peaceful. It's protective. You walk past the local furnace, now cold and abandoned. A relic of a dream that went nowhere. You notice flies circling something nearby. A small animal? No, it's a shoe, still attached to a foot. You look away. The man it belonged to is gone. Or maybe he's what's for dinner. You don't dare check. The local cadre, Comrade Lin, is smiling today. He says the village is meeting targets. He says the province is thriving. He says Chairman Mao is proud. You wonder what he eats at night. You wonder if he's ever been truly hungry. One day, Comrade Lin announces a new campaign. Eliminate the 4 pests. Rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. Yes, sparrows. You're told they eat grain. So you and the others bang pots and clap hands all day to keep the birds from landing. The sky becomes a flurry of feathers. Some sparrows drop mid-air from exhaustion. Children cheer as they fall. But then come the locusts, unchallenged, unchecked, feasting on what little remains. Nature's revenge, delivered with clicking jaws. And still, you clap. Another day, another loss. You pass an old man planting seeds in a hollowed-out shoe. He says it's a good luck charm. You want to believe him. You really do. Later that evening, your cousin doesn't come home. You find him crouched under a bridge, chewing on what looks like a dead bird. He looks at you, eyes hollow. You don't say anything. You just sit down beside him and pretend it's chicken. You've lost track of how long it's been since you tasted salt, or sweetness, or anything that didn't come from desperation. The moon rises, large and full. You lie in bed listening to your grandmother pray to ancestors she no longer remembers. Her voice is brittle, like everything else here. You wonder if they can hear her, if they care. You dream of dumplings, and when you wake, your pillow is wet. You wake up to shouting again, but this time, it's different. Sharper, less choreographed. A row of village cadres is marching down the lane, led by a man holding a clipboard like it's a weapon. Grain inspection. You stand in line with your neighbors, clutching a slip of paper that says how much you contributed to the state granary. Everyone's numbers are lies. Everyone knows it. But lying is safer than starving and being labeled a traitor. The man with the clipboard scribbles furiously. When he pauses in front of your family's plot, you smile, gesture toward the corner where you've stuffed the last few rice stalks to look fuller. He nods, not really seeing, then moves on. A loudspeaker crackles from the commune hall. The harvest is rich. Our village surpasses all expectations. And you wonder if they're talking about a different village altogether. Because here, the only thing growing is silence. Official records from the time claimed harvests had doubled, or even tripled in some areas. Historians still argue whether these reports were forged from fear or fervour, but the result was the same. The government believed the lies, so they came and took more. That's how the ghost harvest begins. The trucks arrive the next day. They roll into the village like visitors from another world. Clean uniforms, shiny wheels, the scent of gasoline. They're here for the grain, but there's none to give. So the cadres take what's hidden. They break into cellars, tear apart floorboards, rifle through bedding. If they find even a fistful of millet, they call it hoarding. You see one woman dragged by her braid through the mud because they found a sealed jar of cornmeal under her baby's crib. She doesn't even scream, just stares, vacant, as if this was always going to happen. One quirky truth. In some areas, villagers began burying grain wrapped in waxed cloth, disguising it as ancestral offerings. Graves became pantries, the dead, unwitting bodyguards of the barely living. You pass by a cart hauling away sacks labelled state property. You wonder how far those sacks will travel. To a warehouse? A city restaurant? Maybe straight into the ground if no one checks. And someone will write it down as a victory. The next week, rations are cut again. You get half a handful of rice husks per day, mixed with something that might be sawdust. You chew slowly, letting the paste coat your mouth before swallowing. It hurts less that way. Your cousin doesn't bother anymore. He just sucks on pebbles, says it tricks the body. You start doing it too. The village kitchen closes down entirely. The last time you walked by, someone had scratched the word help into the soot-black wall. You don't know who did it, but you think about them every time your stomach growls. The dogs are gone now. No barking at night. No tails wagging by the fire. The cats too. And after a while, even the rats disappear. Either they've been eaten, or they're smarter than you. One day, you're told that someone in the next village was caught hoarding sweet potatoes. He was tied to a tree and made to confess in front of everyone. When he collapsed, they left him there. They say he died clutching a potato peel. You don't know if it's true, but it feels true. Because now you've stopped looking for food. You look for calories. A slice of lotus root, a clump of raw rice someone dropped, a single peanut shell you can scrape with your teeth. One day, you find a dead bird in the canal. You rinse it 3 times. Still smells like death. You eat it anyway. You hear rumors that the granary was full all along, that sacks of rice were locked away just 10 miles up the road, protected, preserved. You don't know if that's true either, but you start dreaming of it, of sneaking in, of stealing back what once was yours, a fringe detail. Some state granaries were indeed kept full, their contents rotting while entire regions starved. Officials feared being accused of mismanagement more than they feared the death toll. Better to waste grain than admit the numbers lied. One night, you pass by a neighbor's house and hear something strange, chewing. Not the quiet nibble of hunger, sloppy, desperate, wet chewing. Then a gasp, then nothing. You don't knock, you don't speak of it the next day, but you avoid that house now. The ghost harvest isn't just about missing grain, it's about missing people. You start noticing it. The empty houses, the doors that stay shut, the silence where children used to play. There's no ceremony, no mourning, just absence. The village graveyard grows lopsided with fresh mounds, most without markers. One day, you see someone leave a half-burned incense stick at the base of a tree, not for the dead, but for protection from them. Because when people starve, they become ghosts long before they die. The officials return with new instructions. Strengthen the reporting system, encourage honesty, denounce hoarding. A reward is promised. A bowl of porridge if you turn someone in. The next morning, 3 names are called out. You don't recognize one of them. The other 2 were seen digging near a dried-up well. Looking for roots, maybe. Now they're gone. You don't need porridge. You just need to survive. So you keep quiet. Keep chewing pebbles. Keep walking past empty houses and pretending the smells don't reach you. And every time you pass the granary wall, you run your hand along its cool stone, imagining what's behind it, imagining it's still there. You wake before dawn now, not because of the roosters, they're long gone, but because your body forgets what sleep is when it's this hungry. Hunger isn't an emptiness anymore. It's a hum, a low vibration in your chest that follows you like a shadow. You used to fear pain. Now, you fear the silence when the pain goes quiet. That's when the body begins to give up. Someone stirs in the alley outside. You recognize the limp. Old Mrs. Han. She's out again, scratching around the base of the schoolyard flagpole. You used to raise that flag together, remember? She's hoping to find worms in the dirt. You don't disturb her. You've learned that hunger turns even gossip into danger. Later that morning, a young boy is caught stealing a moldy bun from the commune canteen. He's maybe 9. Instead of punishment, he gets a ceremony. They march him to the middle of the square, and the loudspeaker crackles. Let all see what hunger does to the weak-willed. They shave his head in a square pattern, like a chessboard, and tie a sign around his neck. Grain thief. He stands there all day. By evening, someone's taken pity and untied him. The sign stays. This is the beginning of something darker, of people becoming less like people. You first hear whispers of it from the old men sitting under the broken archway, voices low, eyes twitching toward every passerby. In Shuangfeng, one says, a man boiled his sister's body. Another leans in. And in Gansu, they found a whole family. Gone. Except the bones in the stove. You want to believe it's fiction, but you already know it's not. Mainstream records are sanitized, but scattered among the oral accounts, the village hears the real echoes of cannibalism. Desperate, chaotic, shame-covered cannibalism. Historians still argue whether it was systemic or scattered, but no one denies that it happened. It's just a matter of how often and how far people were pushed. You remember the little girl down the lane. Pretty smile, always had ribbons in her hair. One day, her family vanishes. No funeral, no announcements, just silence. A few days later, you see her shoes outside a neighbor's house. Her shoes, just sitting there. You don't ask. You walk the long way around now. Some families begin sleeping in shifts, not for safety, but because if one dies during the night, the others want to know before the body gets cold. One man ties bells to his mother's wrists. Another sleeps with a blade under his mat, just in case. And yet, the propaganda never stops. The walls are still painted with slogans. Work brings rice. Unity defeats hardship. Your favorite is, eat less, support the state. You used to laugh. Now it sounds like a threat, a quirky tidbit. Some villagers tried eating white clay, kaolin, believing it could trick the stomach. It worked, briefly, until it began hardening in their intestines. By the time anyone realized it was too late. That's how little you trust your hunger. You'd rather eat the earth than nothing. There's another saying floating around now. Better to be eaten after death than buried in vain. No one admits to agreeing, but no one disagrees either. You find yourself checking the breath of your uncle one morning. He's so still, so pale. You reach out, fingers trembling. He exhales, barely. You recoil, not from relief, but from shame at what you were about to do. You weren't going to eat him, not yet. But part of you was curious. It terrifies you. Later that day, you hear the story of a man who offered his thigh to his starving children. He cut the flesh himself, boiled it with wild roots. They say he died smiling, proud to nourish them one last time. You wonder if that's a myth designed to ease the horror, or worse, a story people tell hoping it's true, so they don't feel monstrous. Another day, another truck arrives. This time, not for grain, but for labor. A work detail is being assembled, strong bodies only. The list is short. You lie and say your brother is still strong. They drag him out anyway. He doesn't return. You're told he fulfilled his duty. You start noticing smells. Thick, sweet, rotten smells coming from cooking pots that no one shares. You used to be invited to eat, not anymore. Now, doors close faster. Windows stay shuttered. And every so often, someone disappears and no one asks where. Even the crows are gone now. Your grandmother whispers one night that this is a test, that the ancestors are watching. You don't believe her, but you nod, because she's still here, and warm. And sometimes, you wonder what would happen if she wasn't. That night, you find a bundle behind the compost pit, wrapped in cloth. It's a leg, human, cooked. You don't scream. You just sit. You stare. You think of your cousin, the one who vanished. You think of the foot you saw near the furnace. You think of what hunger can erase. You cover it back up. You never speak of it again. The next morning, there's a sermon over the loudspeaker. Remain vigilant. Trust the party. Endurance is loyalty. You close your eyes and imagine rice. You know what's strange? You stop missing food. Not because you're full, far from it, but because your brain starts to edit the idea of food out entirely. It's like a lover who's been gone too long. You forget the warmth of rice, the crisp edge of fried dough, the comfort of soup that actually coats your stomach. The memory dulls, like a watercolor left in the rain. Instead, you dream of textures, the soft slide of bean curd, the crunch of sugarcane, the bite of vinegar on your tongue. Your body is a museum of phantom tastes. That's when the whispers turn into questions. Not just, did you hear what happened in Yixian? But, what would you do if it came to it? People start speaking in conditionals, in maybes. If someone dies in their sleep and no one sees, they say it as a joke, but no one laughs. And remember the loudspeaker? It's still sputtering every morning, declaring productivity quotas exceeded, even as your commune shrinks day by day. The slogans peel from the walls like old skin. No one bothers to repaint them anymore. One official comes through, younger than the others, eyes sunken but suit still crisp. He reads from a notebook. Any use of human remains will be considered treason. Then he hands out flyers with grain recipes, featuring pine needles. You keep yours, not for the recipe, for the paper. You might need to burn it for warmth. A mainstream historical truth. The Chinese government did eventually issue internal memos acknowledging cannibalism in scattered counties, calling it a deeply unfortunate reaction to sabotage by counter-revolutionaries. These memos never reached the public, of course. Truth traveled by whisper. That night, a girl goes missing. Her name was Rue. You'd spoken to her just 2 days ago. She had that kind of lopsided grin. Always seemed a little too clever for her own safety. Her father says she went to fetch water. Never came back. No one organizes a search, but you remember the man who had watched her walk by? The butcher who hadn't sold meat in over a year but still wore the apron. You glance at his house. The chimney is smoking again. A fringe detail. In some villages, they reinstated ancient taboos and spirit-placating rituals, fearing the souls of eaten kin would curse the living. In desperation, they buried pig skulls as substitutes, hoping to trick the ancestors. You begin to see your neighbors differently. Who looks hungry enough to act? Who looks too weak to stop someone else? A kind of animal logic creeps into every gaze. You catch your own reflection in a shattered water basin and flinch. You look alert. Too alert. Like a scavenger. Your aunt says a boy was found boiling his grandfather's bones to make broth. They buried what was left. The broth they drank. Just calcium, she mutters. Better than clay. You watch a mother try to sell her dead infant's clothes. She stands in the market square, holding the tiny bundle, asking for anything. Sweet potato peels, boiled grass, even a cigarette. No one stops, but no one tells her to leave either. That's the quiet shift. The taboo fades, not with defiance, but with indifference. You notice the dogs again. Not real ones. There are none left, but drawings, scribbled in chalk by some defiant child on a brick wall. A skinny dog with its ribs showing, chasing the moon. It makes you cry for the first time in weeks. Not for the dog, for the moon. You remember your father's voice before he got too quiet. The moon doesn't know we're starving, it just keeps shining. You wish he were wrong, but he's not. Historians still argue whether the famine was a result of policy error, ideological blindness, or a weaponized indifference. It doesn't matter to you now, because policies don't bleed. People do. You begin counting the houses that no longer have smoke. 1, 5, 11. It's a quiet census of death. And yet the cadres keep smiling, as if grinning can summon calories. They say the commune will bounce back. That next spring will be better. But spring is a myth when your ribs show through your coat. One morning, a boy digs up a grave. He says it's his brother's. He says he wants to move the bones, but no one believes that. Not when he starts boiling them in a rusty wok. You don't stop him. You can't, because last night you considered doing the same. Instead, you eat the last of your roof thatch. You boil it twice. The taste is vegetal. You pretend it's seaweed. Pretend you're somewhere near the ocean, where waves still crash and crabs scuttle through the sand, oblivious to this inland apocalypse. Your sister finds an old book in the trash heap, a chemistry manual with diagrams of the human digestive system. You stare at the stomach page. Try to imagine what yours looks like now, shrunken, puckered, furious. Then she turns the page and you see it. A diagram of the human body with all the meat labeled. Shoulder, thigh, liver, for science, for study. You close the book. You don't throw it away. That night, you hear someone sobbing. Not from pain, from eating. You recognize the sound. It's gratitude mixed with shame. Someone's had a full stomach. That's a dangerous thing to notice. You roll over and pretend to sleep. You're not judging them, just imagining. If it were you. The next morning, a smell trails behind one of the houses, like cooked pork, or something pretending to be pork. You don't investigate. You go back to chewing bark. You find yourself thinking in new ways now. Not about survival, but about sequence. Who goes next? Who's still warm? Who's disappeared? And why does no one ask? You keep a mental ledger, a quiet roll call in your head. Because soon, knowledge becomes the last resource you can trade. There's a rumor, this one louder than most, that a whole commune in Henan dug up its burial mounds, roasted the remains, and fed them in secret to those deemed still productive. The elderly were told to be proud. their bodies serving the revolution beyond death. Of course, officials deny it. But then again, they also claim this famine doesn't exist. You pass a once familiar alley, now blocked off with a crude wooden plank. Behind it, someone is cooking. You hear the low bubble of broth, a spoon tapping ceramic. The smell isn't terrible. That's the worst part. It smells comforting. You walk faster. Mainstream historical fact. The 3 years of natural disasters was the official name given to this famine. It blamed the weather, floods, drought, locusts, as if a decade of policies encouraging false grain reports, unrealistic collectivization, and forced crop reallocations had nothing to do with it. You live in one of the provinces hit hardest, and you haven't seen a locust. Your aunt returns from the mountain with a bag of pine cones. She says she saw bones scattered near the old copper mine. Animal, she says. You nod, but she doesn't look you in the eye. A quirky detail from that year. Some villagers began chewing candle wax. Not for light, but for calories. Beeswax, melted and swallowed. Better than dirt. Some even boiled leather shoes. Softened them with vinegar made from rotten leaves. You once laughed at that idea. You're not laughing now. One night, a boy from the next commune collapses outside your door. His lips are cracked, his skin too loose for his bones. He offers you a bundle. Just cloth, no words. You unwrap it and find a hand. Human, cooked, seasoned with wild garlic. He smiles, as if he's proud, then dies at your doorstep. You bury him, but keep the bundle. You don't eat it, but you don't throw it away either. That's how thin the line gets. In the days that follow, you start noticing who's missing and who isn't. Widow He's house has smoke again. Her 3 sons all gone. The neighbor who was blind, vanished. The mute girl with the birthmark, gone too. You're no detective, but the pattern builds itself. Still, no one accuses. Because to accuse is to admit you see it. And once you see it, the guilt becomes communal. Safer to be quiet, safer to eat bark. One afternoon, an old teacher tells you, it's not new. During the Qing famine, they did the same. History cycles. He lights a cigarette he found behind a collapsed shrine. The difference is, now they pretend it's victory. Historians still argue whether the government's refusal to halt grain exports during the famine was negligence or cruelty. Either way, the trains kept running. Grain left the country. Millions starved, and the slogans never stopped. You hear one painted on the water tower. Let us starve today so others may feast tomorrow. You stare at it until the words blur into white. Then comes the ration reform. Each house gets a ledger. Instead of bowls of rice, you now get caloric stamps, not based on need, but on usefulness. If you're too young, too old, too weak, you get less. Or nothing. Your grandfather burns his stamp sheet and says, if I can't eat with honor, I won't eat at all. He dies 3 days later. You wrap him in reeds. Not out of tradition, but because there's no coffin. And no one left to help. The strange part. You don't cry. Not anymore. Instead, you talk to him as you tie the reeds. About the time he caught fish with his bare hands. About how he swore the river never lied. About how he taught you to cook rice without burning the bottom. His hands were strong. You remember that. Then you feel something flicker in your chest. Hunger, yes, but also shame. Because you glance at his thighs. You measure them in your mind, and you hate yourself for it. You don't act, but you thought it. That night, someone knocks at your door. It's the commune official. Clipboard in hand, smile too wide. He asks if anyone in your household has passed. You lie. You say you're all well. He smiles again. Says, good. The state thanks your loyalty. When he leaves, you realize he was smelling for smoke. Not checking names, just noses. You boil leaves that night. Nothing more. A neighbor leaves a bowl at your doorstep. It's cloudy. Smells of bone broth. No note. No explanation. You don't ask who it came from. You don't eat it. But you also don't throw it away. Because now everything is half kept, half wanted, half imagined. One morning, a little girl tries to trade her doll for food. Her eyes are bright, desperate. The man she begs from shrugs, takes the doll, gives her nothing. That's what trades look like now. You think about that, about the things people give up just for a taste of anything. And you wonder if you've already given up more than you realize. The bones in your own back have begun to show. They press like ridges beneath your skin. You trace them at night, as if trying to remember where your muscles used to be. You haven't seen your own smile in weeks. You forget what it felt like. You drift through the days like a ghost tethered to a landscape of broken promises and empty pots. Hunger isn't just a feeling anymore. It's the air you breathe, the pulse of the village, the rhythm that no one can escape. It's all-consuming, like a fog rolling over the mountains, suffocating everything in its path. One morning, you wake to a distant chant. The old ritual singers have returned to the village square, trying to call the spirits to protect the living. Their voices are thin, cracked from years of exhaustion, but their hope is fierce. The songs echo off the cracked walls and broken windows. You watch from a doorway, a flicker of warmth inside you, as if maybe, just maybe, something unseen still cares. But then a chill returns. The same day, a man is found with wounds on his hands. Bite marks. The whispers say he tried to eat the flesh of his own brother. You want to turn away, but the image lingers like a stain on your mind. It's hard to believe, but when you look around at the hollowed eyes of your neighbors, you understand. Hunger distorts everything. The government's response remains cold and distant. Propaganda posters still plaster the streets with smiles and slogans. Unity conquers all. Hardship is a stepping stone. But the smiles look painted on, like masks hiding the unbearable truth. A little-known fact. In some remote counties, local officials reportedly orchestrated secret meat raids, where starving villagers were coerced into sharing human flesh under threat of imprisonment. These horrific acts were buried deep in official archives and oral testimonies alike, emerging only decades later as historians piece together fragments of truth. Historians still debate the extent and organization of these acts, some arguing they were isolated horrors born of desperation, others claiming they reveal systemic collapse. You remember the smell again, that strange, smoky aroma that no one can quite place. Sometimes it wafts from abandoned houses. Other times it clings to the night air like a curse. You try not to think about what it is, but the mind doesn't forget what the body tries to suppress. A neighbor shares a story, half whispered over a cracked bowl of gruel. A woman in the next village boiled her dead son's flesh to feed the living. They say she was caught and disappeared soon after. You imagine the fear, the shame, the unbearable love twisting into something unrecognizable. The surreal moments pile up. You see a man feeding a dog scraps that look suspiciously like human skin. You close your eyes. You see a child clutching a doll with its eyes missing, staring blankly into the void. One evening, you're offered a small bowl of broth by a stranger. The taste is metallic, salty, almost familiar. You swallow it anyway because what choice do you have? The memory lingers on your tongue like a secret you don't want to know. The debate among scholars about this period is still alive, even now. Some frame the famine and its horrors as a tragic consequence of rapid industrialization and ideological zealotry. Others see it as a grim testament to the human capacity for survival under impossible conditions. But to you, those debates feel distant. What matters is the weight on your chest, the ache in your belly, and the silent stories written in the empty chairs around you. And yet, amid all the darkness, small acts of kindness persist. A child offers you a half-eaten piece of steamed bun, a gesture more valuable than gold. An old man shares a secret stash of wild herbs, warning you to chew slowly, savor the bitterness. You clutch these moments like lifelines, reminders that humanity flickers still, even when it feels like it's been snuffed out. The nights grow longer, and the cold seeps deeper. You wrap yourself tighter in your thin coat and listen for the soft breathing of those who remain. You wonder how many more dawns you can endure. You're walking the dusty path toward the far fields when you first see them. Bodies strewn along the roadside like discarded bundles. It's not a sight that shocks anymore. You've grown accustomed to horrors in small doses. But today, the bodies are pale spectres under the high sun, limbs twisted at unnatural angles. You pause, heart catching in your throat, and notice the blackened flies dancing over dark patches on the ground. It's an odd comfort, that buzzing chorus. At least nature remembers its rhythms. You skirt the edge of the road, each footstep kicking up grit. The smell is sweet and rotten, a heavy perfume that sticks to your nostrils. You reach out, hesitating, and brush a sleeve against a hand. The skin feels waxy, almost smooth, like dried leather. You pull back, breath hitching. For a moment you imagine the person it once was. Maybe they laughed in this very field, felt the breeze on their face, believed the party's promises. Now they're just roadkill, human roadkill. A warm gust stirs and carries voices from a nearby cluster of huts. You recognize Comrade Lin's voice, rapid fire and icy. He's lecturing the volunteers who came to bury the dead. They've been given shovels and orders. Bury them beyond sight. No funerals, no gatherings. The volunteers look uncertain, eyes shifting between the corpses and each other. You almost speak, warn them, plead with them to slow down, to remember, but you're silent, because saying anything feels like risking your own life. Officially, these deaths are attributed to exhaustion or illness. But you know better. You found Mrs. Wu last week, her body cold and bloated, her mouth still clenched around a stalk of grass. You saw how her neighbors dragged her into the yard and left her there. No one wanted to touch her, not because they feared sickness, though the threat of typhus was real, but because touching her meant facing the reality you all tried so hard to deny. Historians still argue whether local officials actively covered up these roadside bodies to maintain grain quotas, or simply outsourced the problem because they had no resources left. Regardless, the result is the same. Death piled up where no one could mourn it. You pick up a fist-sized clod of earth and toss it aside. The freshly dug pit gapes like a wound. A volunteer shovels dirt over a foot, then another. Each thud echoes across the empty field. It feels like you're burying hope, not bodies. One quirky detail lingers in your mind. Some villagers whispered that if you buried the dead facing south, the spirits would guide the crops to grow. They laid bodies in rows, aligning them with the sun's path. Of course, the party condemned it as superstition, but no slogan could smother their desperate faith in anything that promised renewal. You continue walking, leaving the burial site behind, but the images follow, an unwelcome slideshow imprinted behind your eyelids. You replay the volunteers' faces, fear, resignation, guilt. They shovel, but their hands tremble. It's a fragile theatre of compliance. As you move on, you pass the makeshift infirmary. It's just a lean-to with straw mats, where people collapse and never get up. A nurse cracks a jar of water for a dying man. He drinks a single drop, then closes his eyes. She wipes his brow, whispering, "Rest, comrade." You wonder if she believes it. There's a hush among the fields, where stalks once stood tall, now broken and bent. The soil is cracked, fissured like old skin, begging for moisture that never comes. You step carefully, avoiding the sun-bleached remains of rats and dogs. You scarcely notice when you almost trip over something bigger, a human skull, half buried at the edge of a furrow. You gasp, crouch low, and use your sleeve to brush it clean. Empty eye sockets stare back at you, accusing you of inaction. You pocket a small fragment, a tooth, smooth and heavy, because you can't bear the thought of leaving it behind. It feels like holding a fragment of history, a tangible confession. Later, when you tuck it into your pocket, its weight grounds you. It whispers a solemn pact. You will remember. That night, you dream of that skull. In the dream, it floats above your pillow, its jaw moving, mouthing pleas in silence. You try to scream, but no sound comes. Then you wake, heart pounding, in the dark. The memory of the roadside, the bodies, the flies, the volunteers, presses in. Your sheets are damp with sweat you don't remember producing. You sit up, run a hand through your tangled hair, and stare at the cracked plaster on the ceiling. You think of the field, of the skull, of your promise to remember. You wonder how many more will join the ranks of those roadside casualties before the world outside notices, or worse, before it stops caring altogether. And yet, in the oppressive stillness, you find a flicker of resolve. If the party will bury their sins, you will uncover them. If the land is silent, you will speak for it. If humanity can vanish into the dirt, you will bring its stories into the light. You lie back down, eyes heavy, and imagine the weight of the earth being lifted. You hold on to that thought as sleep finally claims you, wondering if tomorrow's sun will rise over fields of living wheat or more markers of death. You slip through the back gate of the commune hall, the place where declarations once roared like thunder, but now echoes only hollow silence. The courtyard is empty at this hour, except for Comrade Lin, once the embodiment of unwavering conviction, leaning against a cracked pillar. His uniform hangs loose, his cheeks sunken, and there's an odd sweetness under his breath, like boiled roots steeped in old rice water. You pause, heart thudding, because he was the man who stood on that platform and proclaimed, "There is no famine." Yet here he is, all but confessing it. You approach him quietly, footsteps muffled by the dust. He turns, startled, fingers twitching like he's looking for his clipboard. Instead, he offers you a half smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "Good evening," he croaks, voice low and gravelly. You nod, unsure if you should ask what he's been eating or not eating lately. The air between you is taut, draped in unspoken truths. Officially, Comrade Lin's job is to ensure food production and morale. In November 1959, the party issued a circular acknowledging crop failures in some regions, but insisted that national reserves were sufficient to cover shortfalls, an assertion repeated in every meeting. Historians still argue whether these assurances were willful ignorance or deliberate obfuscation of disastrous data. Either way, the statement prevented emergency relief from reaching the most starving provinces. You remember the circular's red seal, crisp paper folded into envelopes that never reached outsiders. You saw it glide past your doorway once, carried by a nervous courier. You wondered where it went, why nobody smiled when it arrived. Now you know, it became just another piece of unsaid propaganda. Comrade Lin's lips twitch as if he's about to speak, then he glances down at his shaking hands. You notice dark stains under his fingernails, soil from the fields, or something else. He clears his throat. "They want reports," he mutters. "More positive numbers, or they'll send inspectors." You feel the weight of that threat settle in your chest. Inspectors means scrutiny. Scrutiny means confessions. Confessions mean punishment. A breeze stirs the tattered banner above you. Hardships today, glory tomorrow. The words ripple like a dying heartbeat. You recall a time when slogans stirred pride. Now they're just constant reminders of empty promises. You ask Comrade Lin quietly, "Do you ever eat anything real?" His eyes flick to yours. He hesitates. He stops. You can almost hear the gears grinding inside him. "I share what I can," he says finally, voice tight. "With the cadres." He waves a hand toward the darkened windows of his office. "There's a stash." He swallows. Behind the false wall, your heart pounds against your ribs. A stash. You think of the granary walls you trace with your fingertips every morning, the tooth you carry in your pocket. You swallow, uncertain whether to be horrified or relieved that he's human too. That the hunger reached even the highest echelons. A fringe detail. Word had trickled out that some local party committees reserved a secret leadership ration of rice and oil, hidden in basements or false compartments behind slate tiles. Officials denied it vehemently, of course, but whispers persisted. Whispers of midnight convoys delivering sacks of grain to those who enforced quotas. leaving the villagers with chaff. The rumor felt like a bitter comfort, a sign that cruelty spared no one. Comrade Lin's gaze shifts to the cracked earth beyond the courtyard. He seems to shrink in on himself. "We had to survive too," he says, voice barely audible. You hate yourself for hearing pity in his tone, pity for himself. But you swallow again and say nothing, because pity can kill just as surely as hunger. He straightens, smoothing invisible wrinkles from his uniform. "You deserve the truth," he whispers, glancing left and right, as if the wind might carry his words back to the party center. They know how bad it is, but admitting it means acknowledging failure, so they'd rather bury it all under layers of lies. You nod, arms folded, listening. The sky overhead is bruised with dusk, purples and greys folding into darkness. You wonder if another poster will appear tomorrow, blaming natural disasters for the shortages. The 3 years of natural disasters. It's the name they gave the famine, as if floods and droughts alone could explain away the mass deaths of 30-45 million people. You realize how close you stand to this man who once represented authority. Now he's just another figure eroded by starvation. You wonder what he eats at night. You think of the clump of strange stew someone left at your doorstep weeks ago. You never asked who it was from. You never ate it. But something about the smell lingered under your nails for days. Historians still debate whether the central government orchestrated these hoardings, or if they were local initiatives launched by terrified cadres acting alone. The truth, you suspect, is buried somewhere between fear and complicity, a mix that poisons every system it touches. Comrade Lin sighs, the sound of air escaping a cracked valve. "I'm sorry," he says, "but I can't help you." He takes a step back, as if putting distance between you and his shame. You nod again, understanding that some confessions demand their own exile. You turn and retrace your steps through the courtyard, leaving Comrade Lin to his solitude. The night air feels colder now. You press your coat tighter around your frail frame, imagining you could somehow shield yourself from the world's cruelty. You walk past the loudspeaker tower, its once vaunted horn rusted shut, and remember how it used to boom promises of abundance. Now it's as silent as the fields you pass on your way home. You pause at the edge of the far row of houses. Each one is dark except for a single flicker of candlelight in your window. Inside, your family waits, hungry, hopeful, afraid. You wonder what you'll bring them tonight. Bark, pine needles. The thought of it makes your lungs tighten. You close your eyes, recalling Comrade Lin's words. They know. The knowledge feels heavy, like unspent tears lodged in your chest. You wonder what it means to know and do nothing, to carry a secret that could burn you alive if revealed. You open your eyes and step forward, each movement echoing in the silence. Around you, the village breathes in unison, silent, hollow, waiting. And you carry with you the frail ember of a promise, that even when the powerful starve, the powerless will remember. You reach your doorway, hand on the rough wood. You hesitate, heart pounding. Then you push it open and step inside, shutting the cold world out behind you. You step out under a pale moon, careful not to wake the sleeping embers of the village. The night air is crisp against your skin, each breath a soft hiss, as you make your way to the clearing beyond the corn stubble. There, you kneel beside a shallow grave you dug at dawn, still loose, still vulnerable. You've marked it with a broken branch, no headstone, no ceremony, just earth turned over, a quiet offering to the dark. Inside your coat pocket, wrapped in cloth, lies the fragment you unearthed days ago, a small, smooth bone. You press your palm against its curve and feel its cold hardness through the fabric. You whisper an apology, words trapped between you and the vast sky, as if the soil itself might listen. You say you're sorry you touched it, sorry you didn't leave it in peace, sorry you ever thought it could mean something other than death. You lift the cloth and place the bone back into the pit. For a moment, you let your fingertips linger on the edge of the earth, as if you could feel the tremor of memory echoing through the land. Then you cover it with handful after handful of dust, each pat a soft thud that sounds louder than any drum. You heap the soil until it's level with the ground, and then you tamp it lightly with your palm, smoothing the surface like a reluctant canvas. Historians still argue whether these acts of covert burial were genuine attempts at respect, or merely desperate attempts at denial. Some suggest villagers saw proper burial as necessary for ancestral peace. Others contend that fear of discovery drove them to quick, hidden rites. Either way, the bones were never meant to stay buried. You dust your hands on your trousers, feeling the grit between your fingers. From the corner of your eye, you spot a fox slinking along the tree line, its eyes like pale lanterns in the gloom. In daylight, you'd know it as the same fox that raids your chicken coop. Now, in darkness, it feels like an omen, nature's own witness to your secret. You hold your breath, unwilling to disturb its silent vigil, and watch it slip away into the shadows. A fringe detail flickers in your mind. Some villagers whispered that if you buried the dead with a coin in their hand, the spirits would carry the coin to the next world and spare the living further hardship. These coins, often brass scrap, were sometimes scrounged from broken communiques or smashed locket chains. You never found a coin yourself, but you wonder if your bone had one once. Your palms are cold against your thighs, and you rub them together, imagining warmth. You think of your family tucked inside the thin walls of your hut, bodies pressing together under threadbare blankets. You wonder if they dream of this field, of half-buried secrets, or if their hunger has erased even that memory. You stand and brush yourself off, the soil falling away like faint regrets. You pause and place a finger on the ground, tracing the outline of the grave as if committing it to memory. You imagine a sprout rising from it in spring, a tiny rebellion of green. You smile at the thought, though it feels fragile, like mist at dawn. Mainstream records rarely mention individual burials, but government surveys from 1961 noted a decline in registered deaths, suggesting that many bodies went uncounted, lost beneath fields, or hidden in lean-tos. Those gaps in the ledger haunt every village path and unmarked mound. You glance upward. The moon has dipped behind a thin veil of clouds, leaving the world in a grey hush. You take a final look at the smooth earth, then turn away, your boots whispering on the grass. With each step, you carry the weight of unspoken stories, fragments of lives that the state tried to erase. When you reach the edge of the clearing, you pause again, listening. There's the distant rhythm of someone stirring at a pot, the faint breath of wind through broken window panes, and the steady beat of your own heart. No one saw you bury the bone. No one knows the grave even exists. But you do. As you slip back toward the village, you think of Comrade Lin's admission, that the party knows, but says nothing. You wonder if hiding bones is any different than hiding truth. Both are acts of desperation. Both rely on faith that someone will remember. You step into the shadow of your home, feeling its worn doorframe under your fingertips. You pause, exhale, and let the quiet of the night follow you inside. Behind you, the earth rests, harboring its secrets. You awake before dawn again, but this time you don't rise. Instead, you lie on your back, listening to the hollow thump of your heart against ragged lungs. Outside, the sky shifts from an inky black to a bruised purple, and the cold sting in your fingers becomes its own reminder. Survival isn't natural. It's earned each day. You roll over, dreading the ritual of scraping bark for breakfast, and realize your hunger has woven itself into your dreams. By mid-morning, you find the village square eerily empty. The communal well stands silent, its bucket unpulled, its rope fraying. You step toward it, half expecting to find water, but instead discover a cluster of offerings at its rim. Wilted flowers, broken combs, a small stack of thin paper sheets. Someone has lit incense. Tiny wisps of smoke curl into the chill air. It's a prayer well now, they say, begging the spirits for rain or mercy, or both. You trace the edge of the well with your fingertips, feeling the smooth stone warmed by yesterday's sun. It's here that the real hunger gathers, where people come not for water, but for hope. You drop a pebble into the well, hoping its echo isn't the only sound you hear echoing back. It plunges into darkness, swallowed whole. Researchers note that during the Great Famine, communal wells often became focal points for folk rituals, blending Taoist, Buddhist, and ancestral customs into improvised ceremonies. Historians still argue whether these practices offered genuine solace or simply traded one illusion for another. But in that moment, gazing into the empty shaft, you don't care which it is. You leave the well behind and wander toward the market area, where once there were stalls brimming with produce. Now, only scraps remain. A single charred cob still clinging to its husk, a cracked gourd hollowed of seeds, a scrap of fish scale shimmering on a wooden plank. You crouch and pick up the fish scale, turning it over in your fingers. It's absurdly beautiful, like a sliver of silver moonlight trapped in the ruin. You pocket the scale and move on. At the far end of the market, a silent crowd has gathered around a makeshift podium. An elderly man stands there, thin robes draped over his emaciated frame. He's reciting lines from a book you used to think was myth, the Book of Documents, tales of ancient floods and righteous heroes. His voice cracks as he reads about survival and virtue, and you feel a flicker of something you haven't felt in weeks, a spark of collective memory, a fringe detail. In some villages, elders resurrected classical texts, Confucian canons, Tao Te Ching passages, to remind people of moral obligations beyond survival. They whispered that if you could remember the old teachings, you might reclaim your humanity. Cultivate virtue, they'd say, even when your body betrays you. It sounds poetic, almost futile, but you listen anyway. You realize this stage is new. Not just surviving, but remembering why. A hush settles over the crowd as the old man closes the book and looks up. His eyes are bright with tears. "We are more than what we eat," he says simply. Hold fast to that. You feel something shift inside you, an ember igniting. For days you've been a soul tethered to hunger. Now you feel the first stirrings of resistance, not against the party, but against oblivion. You don't know how to protest. You don't know if there's any point, but you understand that stories matter. You turn away, carrying the fish scale in your pocket, and the echo of the elder's words in your mind. You pass a young woman sitting alone on a stone bench, cradling a wilted lotus blossom. Her eyes meet yours, and she offers a small nod, an unspoken pact. You nod back. You're both witnesses. The day wears on, and you head to the communal hut, where they're distributing a thin porridge of millet husks. Volunteers stand in line, ladles clattering against chipped bowls. You wait your turn, ignoring the sting of shame in your chest. When you reach the front, the volunteer looks at you, hesitates, then adds an extra scoop, just one more spoonful than what's allotted. You don't ask why. You accept it with a whispered "Ziexi," the only Chinese words you can summon tonight. She nods, turns away, and you retreat to sit by the side of the hut. You hold the bowl gingerly, as if it's a fragile relic. You take a sip. The warmth spreads, and for a moment, your body remembers comfort. That night, you lie awake again, this time not because of hunger, but because of the echoes of that fish scale and that extra ladle of porridge. You think of the elder's words, "We are more than what we eat." You think of the villagers chanting by the well, the elder reading ancient texts, the volunteers' quiet compassion. You close your eyes and see flashes, the well, the scale, the elder, the bowl. Each is a thread in a tapestry you're still weaving, your own act of witness. You drift into a sleep filled with whispers of survival and the faint promise of rain. You awaken with the sound of distant drums, a slow, steady rhythm vibrating through the village, like a heartbeat trying to rally its fading strength. The sky is pale and overcast, a heavy curtain that dulls color and hope alike. You step outside, feeling the rough wood of your doorframe beneath your fingertips and the chill that seems to seep into every bone. Today, the drums aren't for celebration. They're a call to work, or perhaps a summons to a meeting. Another demand on your dwindling energy. You find yourself drawn toward the commune's administrative center, a squat building with cracked windows and peeling paint. Inside, the air is thick with tension, and the faces you see are gaunt, haunted. There's an official waiting, a party cadre, whose eyes flicker with an unsettling mix of fatigue and something sharper, something like desperation. He holds a ledger swollen with names and numbers, the calculus of death and rationing. You lean in to listen as he speaks of quotas, of production goals unmet, of how every failure ripples upward. The language is bureaucratic, cold, but beneath the surface lies a cruel irony. As crops fail, the demands grow heavier. You realize that to survive, you must produce more from less. It's like trying to fill a bottomless jar with sand. A fringe detail surfaces in your mind. Some local officials resorted to enforcing impossible grain delivery targets by confiscating every last kernel from starving households, even at the risk of death. The party line insisted on revolutionary zeal, but the cost was measured in empty stomachs and silent graves. Historians still argue whether these measures were centrally planned or the result of autonomous local zealotry, but either way, the outcome was devastating. You look at the cadre's ledger again and notice a peculiar annotation beside several names. Dead, unregistered. A chill runs down your spine. You realize that the ledger doesn't capture the full scope of loss. Many deaths, like the ones you buried quietly in the fields, will never be tallied. You turn and leave the building, stepping into the grey light of afternoon. The village seems quieter than usual, the air heavy with unsaid grief. You pass the market again, now stripped of even the remnants of food. A group of children play nearby, their laughter brittle and fleeting, like fragile glass. You watch them, wondering what will become of this generation born into famine. Your thoughts drift to the strange rumors that circulated during this time, tales whispered behind closed doors about families forced to desperate acts. While official reports deny such stories, some accounts suggest that cannibalism, while horrifying and rare, did occur as a last resort in certain pockets. Scholars debate the extent and causes, some attributing it to social collapse and extreme deprivation, others pointing to exaggeration or propaganda. But the fear it sowed was real, and the silence around it heavier still. You shudder at the thought, but also feel a strange sense of understanding. Hunger strips away more than flesh. It erodes dignity, community, even memory. And yet, the village endures. Somehow, in the crevices of despair, small acts of kindness persist. A neighbor shares a pinch of salt. A mother hides a dried root for her child. As evening falls, you find yourself back at your hut, tracing the cracks in the mud walls. The world outside is cloaked in twilight, and inside, the flicker of a candle casts long shadows. You think of the ledger, the children's laughter, the rumors whispered like forbidden spells. You clutch the small fish scale you saved, feeling its cool weight, a silent reminder of resilience amidst ruin. You lie down, muscles aching, and close your eyes. The drumbeat fades, replaced by the quiet hum of the night. Your mind drifts between memory and dream, carrying the weight of what was lost and the fragile hope of what might still be saved. You step outside into a morning hung with fog, the kind that blurs the world into uncertain outlines, much like your memories of life before the famine. The mist curls around tree trunks and fences, softening edges until everything feels like a half-remembered dream. Today, you've promised yourself to seek out the local teacher, the one who once tried to plant seeds of learning in this barren land. Perhaps there are still lessons to salvage. You find him by the old schoolhouse, its gate hanging crooked on rusty hinges. Inside, desks stand empty and chalkboards are scarred with half-erased lessons. The teacher himself sits on the threshold, hunched over a tattered geography book. His hands tremble as he traces the rivers of China with a finger. He looks up when you approach, and for a moment you see recognition, then relief, as if any visitor might carry news of rain. "Have you come for the lesson?" he asks quietly, voice rough like gravel. You nod, uncertain what you'll learn beyond more sorrow. He motions you inside. The classroom smells of mildew and dust. On the blackboard, faded chalk reads, "Unity is strength," a slogan once scrawled in bold strokes. The teacher dusts off a corner and begins to sketch mountains and rivers, the familiar curves of the Yangtze. He speaks of how these waterways sustained civilizations for millennia, how people learned to harness them, to plant along their banks, to celebrate floods and droughts alike as part of life's cycle. You listen, drawn into the rhythm of his voice, and suddenly you see parallels to your own plight. The waters of memory, the floods of propaganda, the drought of truth. He pauses, glances at you, and says softly, "History is not only what was recorded, but also what was lived. We must remember both." A mainstream fact. During the famine, many schools were closed and teachers reassigned to agricultural labor. This disruption in education had long-term effects, contributing to regional literacy declines and a generation disrupted. Historians still argue how this educational void shaped post-famine China's social fabric. The teacher turns to an empty desk. "This seat was once occupied by Li Mei," he says, voice cracking. "She was 13, bright as the spring sun." He pauses, letting the image settle. She loved poetry. She wrote about blossoms and moonlight. You imagine her, ink-stained fingers trembling as she crafted lines about hope. Then you imagine what might have become of her. The teacher's lips press together, and he closes the geography book. A fringe detail. Some students preserved their writing by hiding manuscripts inside hollowed-out gourds or beneath floorboards. These scraps of poetry and diaries surfaced decades later, offering poignant glimpses of young minds grappling with desperation. They remind you that even in collapse, creativity clung on. You glance at the teacher's wrist, where he's carved a tiny symbol, a stylized grain stalk, into his skin. A reminder, he says when you notice, that every grain carries a story. You think of the stalks you once planted, the fields you watched turn to dust, and the communal granary that swallowed it all. He stands and moves to the front of the class. "Education isn't safe from famine," he says, chalk in hand. "But ideas can't starve." He writes a single word. "Remember." The letters tremble, as if echoing the room's own uncertainty. You feel a warmth rise inside you, unexpected and urgent. For the first time in months, you sense a purpose beyond mere survival. You realize that memory, of hunger, of loss, of what once was, must be preserved. Otherwise, this haze of fog and despair will swallow all traces of life before the darkness. You leave the classroom with the teacher, stepping back into the fog-laden morning. A crow caws somewhere above, and you shiver, not from cold, but from resolve. You tuck the fish scale deep into your pocket, alongside the grain of bone and that scrap of fish scale from before, tokens of witness. You imagine weaving them into a story that might outlive you, a thread of truth in the tapestry of lies. As you walk through the village, you nod to the few souls who still linger at doorways. The widow pounding medicinal herbs, the man carving wooden flutes, the mother teaching her child to count on fingers. Each carries their own fragment of history, their breath a testament to endurance. You reach the well once more. This time, you drop in a piece of chalk, the teacher's chalk, carried in your hand. You hear the echo diminish, and you whisper, "For memory." You step away, shoulders straight, feeling the weight of that single act. It's small, but it resonates like a drumbeat in your chest. Night falls again, but your dreams shift. Instead of hunger, you dream of pages, ink on paper, lines marching across fields of white. You dream of maps, of rivers that carry life, of children reciting poetry under starlit skies. And most of all, you dream of a world where remember is more than a word. It's a promise. You step into the dimly lit room where a small group of survivors has gathered, hunched figures pressed close together, voices barely above a whisper. The air is heavy with incense smoke and untold stories. You take a seat on the hard wooden bench, the same one you used to wait at the market, but now it feels sacred, like a confessional. Your heart hammers as you prepare to listen. An elderly man leans forward and speaks in riddles. The river never forgot us, though we forgot ourselves. His eyes, cloudy with age, glitter with something unspoken. You want to ask him to explain, but the moment you open your mouth, he falls silent, eyelids drooping. He's offered his share of pudding, whatever that is these days, but he doesn't touch it. Instead, he strokes the grain-blue cloth wrapped around his hands, a gift from someone too stubborn to let him go hungry. Next, a woman stands. Her voice is soft, cotton against a razor. "I dream of rain," she says, staring into nothing. But the sky's mouth is closed. A collective shiver ripples through the room. You shiver too, though the hut is warm. You remember the cracked sky above the fields, how the clouds refuse to weep. A younger man clears his throat and offers a half smile that doesn't meet his eyes. "We survive by becoming ghosts," he whispers, invisible to everyone. He lifts his sleeve to show faded scars, thin lines from barbed wire, or perhaps a fence he crawled under in search of roots. You trace the path of those lines in your mind, imagining the pain they map. You're here to understand, but you realize there's no straightforward story. The survivors speak in fragments, metaphors, half-memories, silent pauses heavy as stone. They clutch small tokens, a chipped bowl, a scrap of red cloth, a single rice grain glued to a leaf. Each object is a universe. You fold your hands around your own token, the porcelain fish scale, feeling its cool weight. It hums against your palm, a private confession, a mainstream fact. Oral histories collected decades after the Great Famine revealed that many survivors chose silence as a survival strategy, believing that words could invite scrutiny or judgment. Historians still argue whether this silence signified collective trauma or a pragmatic refusal to relive horrors. Either way, their muted voices shape the narrative you're piecing together. You lean forward when an old seamstress speaks. She presses a threadbare quilt to her cheek. "I wrap myself in warmth that never was mine," she murmurs, voice trembling. You sense she's describing more than the quilt. Perhaps memories, lost connections, the safety of a full stomach. You nod, knowingly. You felt the weight of absence in every empty corner of this village. A fringe detail drifts through your mind. In the aftermath, some villages held silent memory ceremonies where people lit candles and sat in darkness for hours, refusing to speak so the ghosts could have their say. No one drafted an agenda. There were no speeches, just shared breath in the dark. The practice vanished within a year, labeled unproductive, but survivors say it was the only time they felt truly seen. You look around the circle. Each face is carved by suffering, yet threaded with resilience. A teenage girl stirs the ash in a clay bowl, releasing the scent of something burned, perhaps wood, perhaps a page from her notebook. She meets your gaze for the first time and offers a ghost of a smile. It's a small miracle. You realize that this is their gift, not explicit testimony, but shards of memory suspended in time. You collect them like fragments of a mirror, reflecting partial truths that together form a kaleidoscopic whole. There are no tidy stories here, only lived experiences that refuse simple narration. You shift on the bench and recall the teacher's chalk you dropped into the well, the bone you buried in the field, the ledger's dead, unregistered entries. Each was a silent witness. Now, these people sit before you, witnesses unspoken, their presence a testament to survival itself. You stand to leave, and the room feels smaller, packed with the weight of things unsaid. The survivors nod as you pass, their eyes inviting you to carry their fragments. You step outside into the night, the sky a deep indigo and the air cool against your cheeks. You press the porcelain fish scale to your lips, tasting its lingering memory. A soft breeze stirs the ash in the courtyard's lantern and carries the faint scent of pine. You inhale, letting the aroma root you to this place of paradox, where silence speaks louder than words, and where the ones who lived bear the heaviest truths. As you walk home, You feel the shards of memory within you assemble into something like purpose. You envision gathering these fragments, tokens, metaphors, half-spoken regrets, and weaving them into a narrative that honors the silent witnesses. Not because you seek closure, but because remembering is the only thing that can fend off oblivion. You pass the well one last time. Its dark mouth seems to breathe. You offer a silent promise to those who spoke in riddles. Their silence will not vanish. You turn away, the cool echo of their voices humming in your chest, and step forward into the unseen dawn. You walk through the village at first light, the air crisp with the faint promise of dawn. The streets lie silent, as if holding their breath before a reckoning. You pass the burned-out stove in the communal yard, the one that once boiled whatever proxy for food you could scavenge. Now it's a hollow monument, rusted iron cradling ash and memory. You pause, finger tracing the scorched edge, thinking of every meal that never came, and every mouth that went hungry. Your steps carry you to the site where bodies were lined like broken stakes, the place you once skirted in terror. Now the field rests fallow, soil smoothed by wind and rain, erasing footprints and furrows alike. You kneel and sift your fingers through the earth, uncovering a small, cracked bowl, perhaps dropped by someone who never made it home. You cradle it, fingertips sliding over its rim, imagining the hands that held it, the fragile hope they poured into its emptiness. Official histories paint the famine as 3 years of natural disaster, but you know the fuller truth. It was 3 years of policy, propaganda, and neglect layered atop environmental catastrophe. Historians still argue whether Mao's directives were the root cause or whether local mismanagement amplified the crisis. But in the hollows of these fields, such debates feel academic. You've tasted the calculus of death, calories counted and lives discounted in dusty ledgers. You stand and move toward the old granary, its massive doors sealed shut. Every morning you pressed your hand against its cold stone, imagining the grain within, your grain, belonging to all of you. You wonder now if that storehouse was ever full, or if it was always a mausoleum for broken promises. A fringe account surfaces. Some officials claim to find handfuls of grain stashed in hidden compartments, enough to feed dozens for months. They vanish soon after, leaving names scrubbed from records. You circle the granary and find a small crack in the masonry. Through it, you glimpse darkness and the faintest glint of light on metal. Perhaps a forgotten tool, perhaps nothing at all. You press your ear to the wall, half expecting to hear ghosts whisper through the stone. Instead, silence, complete and unsettling. Your path leads you next to the poorly marked cemetery, rows of earthen mounds knobby as toadstools. Some have makeshift markers, chipped stones or painted sticks. Others blend seamlessly into the landscape. You step between them, each mound a muted echo of a life lost. You place the cracked bowl atop one of the markers, a silent tribute to those who carried bowls of bark, shells of rice, bones of strangers, all in the hope of sustaining the living. A faint wind stirs, carrying a scent of pine and distant smoke. You lift your gaze to the crest of the hill, where the old watchtower stands, skeletal beams against the sky. You climb the worn steps, breath coming hard in your chest. From the top, the village unfurls below, shattered huts, empty fields, silent roads, and beyond, the horizon, mountains wrapped in morning haze, as if shielding the world from what transpired here. You kneel at the tower's edge and place your hands on the wooden railing. Below, the earth holds its scars, but it also breathes with the pulse of those who remain, few though they are. You close your eyes and say their names softly. Mrs. Liu, who vanished one night. The boy whose body you buried by the well. The teacher who drew rivers to teach remembrance. The elder who spoke in riddles. The seamstress cloaked in silence. As the sun breaks over the ridge, a single ray cuts through the haze, illuminating the village in gold. It feels like a benediction, an unmerited grace. You realize that even after all the hunger, the loss, the horror of cannibalism born of desperation. There remains an ember of life that no policy can extinguish. You stand, shoulders squared, and look eastward. The wind picks up, whispering through the tower's beams, carrying your promise forward. You will speak of what happened here. You will give voice to the silent, shape the fragments into a narrative that can't be buried again. You will remember. You climb down and make your way back to the village, carrying the cracked bowl and an unshakable resolve. On the road, a single sparrow lands on a fence post, head cocked as if greeting you. You pause, heart swelling at the sight of life's persistence. The bird flutters off, wings beating a gentle rhythm, an invitation to continue. You follow its flight path toward your hut, each step a negotiation between grief and hope, memory and renewal. And now, as the journey's edges blur into twilight, you settle into the gentle hush of remembrance. You've walked through fields of sorrow and hunger, witnessed the worst of human desperation, and met the silent witnesses who carry the weight of untold stories. Yet here, in the lingering glow of dawn, you find a softer rhythm, the slow exhale after a great storm. Feel your shoulders loosen as you trace the curve of that cracked bowl one last time. Its chips and cracks like the scars you bear. The world around you breathes more softly now. The wind rustles pine needles into a lullaby. The sparrow's call fades into the promise of morning birdsong, and the earth beneath your feet feels warm with possibility. Rest in the knowledge that even in famine's darkest hours, humanity flickered. A teacher's chalk, a fish scale saved, a clandestine burial in a hidden field. These acts of witness wove a thread of light through the darkness. Remember them as you would the soft hum of cicadas on a summer night, the gentle sway of lanterns in a quiet courtyard, the hush before dreams take flight. Let the names of those you met, Mrs. Liu, the barefoot boy, the seamstress in her quilt, be whispered in your mind like a prayer. Honor their stories with the quiet of your breath, the stillness of your thoughts. Now, feel your eyelids grow heavy, the memory of hunger dissolving into a soft haze. And as you drift towards sleep, hold on to the promise of that sparrow's flight, the enduring spark of life that no famine can extinguish. Sweet dreams.